Firsthand experience. For me, COVID is nothing to play with. In fact, I think COVID is a very dangerous disease. By now, so many of us know someone or know several people, several family members who have had it and lost loved ones. And so I say COVID is very serious and it's nothing to play with. I was tested the last week of December, got an email back January 2nd that said I was positive. And around that time, I was experiencing a little scratchy throat, and I hardly ever get sick. So I said, well, maybe there's a cold, so I'll take a little something. But it went from there to the body aches. I had never had the flu, so I'm wondering why I felt sore, and so my body was hurting so much until there were days when the clothes on my body that I had on hurt my skin. It's kind of crazy to describe. And then from there, I lost my taste, and there was the coughing that just would not stop, and then the excruciating headache, and then the fever came, and it was really something. And I was watching that fever. My wife was watching it as I was isolated in the back room at my house, not wanting to get my wife and daughter infected, and fortunately they were not. And so there was one day, the fever got to the point, my wife said, they said if you get a fever of 100 or over, go to the ER. And so I had gotten dressed. We were in the garage, headed to the ER. And my wife said, well, let me check this one more time. And my temperature had dropped. And I had this fear going to the hospital. I don't want to be insensitive to those who have gone through that, but so many stories of people going in the hospital and not coming out. And so we fought that fever, but with the coughing, the fever, the chills, the loss of taste, it took me weeks to get my strength back. It was as if the disease had just pulled all the strength out of my body. And so it took me weeks to get back. I didn't preach the entire month of January. I feel great. I am so thankful. I'm grateful. You know, I grew up in church, and we used to say years ago, I'm thankful for my life, health, and strength. But that really is where I am right now. I'm thankful because I tell people I'm back. I've got my strength back, and I'm preaching again. And I don't take light of the fact that so many people, the disease took a wrong turn, and they didn't make it back. So I'm doing fine today. I'm very glad to say. I was isolated for almost 3 weeks because from the day I felt like I had the cold, I told my wife, I said, well, and even if there's a cold, I don't like to just cough around people. So I began to just isolate myself then. And so by the time I got the positive result, I was already isolated. So I stayed in this room, and it got kind of scary because you can feel this disease in your body, and there's nothing you can do about it except sort of wait it out. And so there were days when I felt terrible. I didn't want to tell my wife because I didn't want to make her afraid. She was really concerned, but it took a good 2 weeks and almost that 3 weeks to just feel like I was coming out of that.
Would you encourage African Americans to get the vaccine?
I would. Like I said, I have heard of so many people who've lost their life in the past year. I know people locally. I've had a family member in the last 2 weeks who died from complications related to COVID. And so I would encourage people to do the research, because I believe it is a personal decision that one has to make. But do the research and make an informed decision. But I think it's imperative that we do everything we can to live for ourselves and for those who love us. And so if the vaccine is going to help us survive this, I would tell anybody, If the vaccine would help you avoid what I went through, then by all means take it. And then there are people who say that because I didn't go to the hospital, I had a light case. I don't think there's any such thing as a light case of COVID because it can so easily go wrong. So I'd encourage people to take the vaccine. If it's been proven to help our quality of life, then by all means.
And I think at some point you'll be able to take it, not right now.
For sure.
And will you when you can?
I will. My doctors told me that I should wait at least 3 months, 3 to 4 months after having had COVID. And then with my age, I understand that I may be in the category of Section 1B, or I forget how you say that. But I think in several months toward the spring or summer, it'll be my time. And whatever I can do to avoid that again, I'm going to do it. You know, sad to say, in many cases, that's the truth. You know, history has proven that there are, well, I'll say, there are cases where people feel like they have the reason to mistrust vaccines and what the government may do. And so for that reason, there are some who may not be totally against it, but I know some who say, I want to wait to see the effects. They don't want to be first in line. They may get in line later, but not right now. And then there are some who absolutely refuse it because they think that there may be something that we aren't being told. These vaccines have been created very quickly compared to some other vaccines. And so there are a lot of African Americans who honestly say, I don't want to be first. But hopefully that trend will turn, it'll change. I will stand up and tell everybody, you don't want to experience COVID like I did and some of the worst cases that I've heard of. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And so I would encourage a person, whatever they can do to avoid that, absolutely. And I have shared with my church my experience, and I encourage people to do what they can to stay safe and to live. You know the old movies when someone was, I guess, sick or locked up, and they would sit a plate outside the door. That's what my wife did for weeks. I didn't even see her, you know, except on FaceTime. But so I was in there. It was me and God, and so a lot of prayer, a lot of. It helped me put life in perspective, and I had a chance to think about what's important, and I realized that we can't take life for granted. We can't take our health for granted. I appreciated my wife who brought me meals 3 times a day and whatever medicine I was doing. So it helped me put life in perspective along with a whole lot of prayer, to be honest.
And maybe put science in perspective too?
Yes, we can't ignore it. We can't ignore science. We pray, but I think it's important also that we have to know that God gave the scientists the wisdom, and we can pay attention to that. And I think those things too, science and prayer, I think it'll help us live. Absolutely.
Oh, he's